This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Beginning today's show is Mitch Ricketts, Professor of Agricultural Safety and Health at K-State, with two segments as he talks about respiratory hazards with silage. He explains the concerns, what causes them, and what growers need to be watchful of. Mitch also mentions what people need to do if something does happen and a person is unconscious. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd ends the show discussing the potential damage Japanese beetle adults, green June beetle adults, mimosa webworms, and fall armyworms can cause, and whether any control methods should be taken. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show discussing a lesson from a recent publication titled Protecting Yourself from Respiratory Hazards in Agriculture with Professor of Agricultural Safety and Health at K-State, Mitch Ricketts. Mitch, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Shelby.
Mitch, this lesson titled Gases in Farm Storage Structures and Wells, and first really wanting to focus on silage and what's some concerns when it comes to storing silage?
Well, Shelby, when we store silage, the natural process, the bacteria that begin breaking down the silage, they produce a number of gases, and some of these gases are very toxic to people. And these gases are produced, it's regardless of the type of silage that's made, whether it's corn or alfalfa, oats, anything else. And the gases are produced in all types of silage storage structures, whether they are the old-fashioned upright silos, the bunker silos or trench silos, or even the newer bag silos. In all of these cases, large quantities of toxic gases are produced.
What are those toxic gases?
Farmers often will see a yellowish or even a dark brown or orange haze around a silage structure. And you may see these around the bags, around the pile silos. Sometimes you even see it around the upright silos. These gases are oxides of nitrogen. The two that are really visible and that will have an odor and can cause a great deal of damage to our lungs are nitrogen dioxide and dinitrogen tetroxide. So those are the two gases that are always going to be a hazard regardless of the type of silo that we have. And sometimes these will escape from a silo, they'll escape from the bags and from the bunkers, and those gases, they'll travel wherever the wind takes them. So if there are vehicles parked nearby, or if these structures are near buildings, those gases can enter the buildings and the vehicles. And even we've tested the air around outdoor silage structures and around bag silos and pile silos. Very often, the gases in the open air near those silos are at very high levels, levels that the government labels immediately dangerous to life and health. So even going up, if you see that yellow haze or orange, if you walk into that and breathe that can cause a great deal of damage to your lungs. The damage does not happen immediately. Some of the other gases we're used to, like ammonia and chlorine, they've got really good warning properties. As soon as we breathe them, they hurt. They cause us to cough. With these oxides of nitrogen, they don't always do that. Very often the effects don't become evident, sometimes for hours or even days. It's very common that people will get into these gases, and they might find them mildly irritating, but they can continue to work in them. And then, as time goes on, after they've gotten out of the gases, as time goes on, then they start feeling ill. It's a very common thing for a person to wake up in the middle of the night the night after they've been exposed and to have trouble breathing and to have to go to the hospital. And then at that time to find out that their lungs are full of fluids. So the oxides of nitrogen, they tend to have a delayed effect. Now, with the upright silos, if you enter those, then we've got other gases that we're concerned about as well. These are gases that may lower the oxygen level. Sometimes the oxygen level inside an upright silo is very low, too low to support life. Also, there may be other poisonous gases that are concentrated inside the silo, such as carbon monoxide, methane, and even very high levels of carbon dioxide that can become toxic.
Are these gases around for the first hour after you put that silage in, or for weeks, or what's that timeline?
Yes, and Shelby, it kind of depends on the gases that we're talking about, and it depends a little bit on the type of silage structure. With bag silos and trench silos, these gases they will begin being produced almost immediately, and typically within 4 to 8 hours. Let's say closer to 8 hours after a bag has been filled, we may begin to see a cloud of yellow or orange gases around that, and the same thing with bunker silos. In upright silos, we often don't see that gas until it begins pouring. It takes a little bit longer for it to begin pouring out of the silo because it may have to fill up the head space first. The gas is still being produced, but it may not be visible quite as soon. Now, with the oxides of nitrogen, they start being produced just a few hours after the silage has been stored. They then will decrease, they will continue to increase for a day or two, and then they will begin to decrease. And most of those oxides of nitrogen, if there's good ventilation, will be gone in a couple of weeks. The problem, though, with upright silos is that with those, you've got more of an enclosed environment, and in an upright silo, we never really know how long the hazardous gases are going to be in there. The oxides of nitrogen are likely to decrease over time, but the low oxygen content, that can stay on pretty much until the silo is empty. So it's never really safe to go into an upright silo without doing some air monitoring.
Are these gases always produced or just sometimes?
They are always produced in some quantity. Now, there are times when they are produced in much higher quantities. For instance, if the crops are stressed before they're cut, they tend to have more nitrates in them, and that can create more nitrogen oxides. If there has been a drought, and then right before you harvest, it rains, then the crops will tend to take up a lot of nitrates from the soil. So the more nitrates that you have, the more of these nitrogen oxides will be produced. Crops that are weedy or have been damaged by pests tend to have more nitrates in them, so they tend to produce more of the oxides of nitrogen.
You mentioned that these gases just escape. And so is there a concern with maybe vehicles or buildings being close to where that silage is being stored?
Yes, some of the big concerns that we have here, many of the cases where people and animals have been injured has been when silage structures were located next to buildings. For instance, livestock are often exposed to oxides of nitrogen and sometimes killed when there is a feed room attached to a silo, or when silage bags are stored near a barn, or when bunker silos are located near barns. The other issue is that sometimes silage crews will park their vehicles. At the end of the day, they may park their trucks next to silage bags or other silage structures. And at the time when they leave at the end of the day, there may not be any silo gases or any silage gases in the air, but then when they return in the morning, their vehicles may be engulfed in a yellow or orange haze. And it's very, very dangerous then to try and enter those vehicles. The other thing that tends to happen with silage bags, at the end of the day, if your bag is not quite full, there is a tendency to leave the bagger attached to the bag because the bags are expensive and you don't want to waste whatever's left of the bag. Then when you come back the next morning, the bagger is often engulfed in this yellow or orange haze. And we've measured the concentrations near the baggers the next morning and near the vehicles that have been left by the bags next morning. And we've found that in open air, sometimes those gases are above the level that's considered immediately dangerous to life and health. And at that level, a person can become incapacitated. They may be unable to escape, or even if they do escape, the gases may do so much damage to their lungs that they may become permanently disabled, and in some cases they may even be killed.
That was Professor of Agricultural Safety and Health at K-State, Mitch Ricketts, as he discussed concerns for humans and animals when it comes to silage gases. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll once again be joined by Mitch as he continues his conversation. However, if you're not going to be back with us when we come back from our break, you can always find the rest of today's conversation on agtoday.net or by searching for Agriculture Today on your favorite podcast platform. If you're just wanting to find more information about this publication, which is titled Protecting Yourself from Respiratory Hazards in Agriculture, I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're now cutting to that short break. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show and conversation with Professor of Agricultural Safety and Health at K-State, Mitch Ricketts. Mitch, as we continue talking about this, within the publication, there are some examples of where some unfortunate things have happened when it comes to silage gases.
Yes. The first cases that were ever reported, the very first cases were back in 1914. We didn't put those in the publication, but they're very interesting. In 1914, at a state hospital in Ohio, some residents of the state hospital were helping to put up silage, and they were in an upright 40-foot silo. And as the silage was being placed into the silo, these residents of the state hospital, they would walk down the silo. They would level it by walking around in there. And one day they had partially filled a silo. They came back the next morning, and 4 of the residents entered the silo to start walking it down. 2 other residents, about 5 minutes later, started to enter the silo. They looked down, and the first 4 who entered appeared to be dead. There ended up being a long rescue effort. Eventually, the 4 persons were brought out, and they were all found to be dead. And this was the first case that was ever published in a medical journal of persons being killed in a silo. And we've got other cases that we've included in the publication. There have been many cases. We chose these to try to illustrate the range of incidents that can happen. In one case, a dairy farmer climbed the chute of the silo 2 days after it was filled. And while he was climbing the chute, he noticed this gas in the air. There was this yellow-orange gas in the air. It was a little bit uncomfortable. And for those who have ever smelled this, at a distance where it's not very thick in the air, it tends to smell a little bit like bleach. It has kind of a sweet odor. It reminds me of the odor that you get when you approach a swimming pool, just kind of a faint bleach odor. And then at higher concentrations, it's irritating. Well, he was climbing the chute of the silo. He encountered this irritating gas, but he was still able to work. So he entered the silo, and he was doing some coughing, but he was still able to work. So he finished his day of work, went home, went to bed, and then this is what often happens. He woke up in the middle of the night and felt very ill. He was having trouble breathing. The next morning, he went to the hospital. He was wheezing, sweating, very weak. Doctors found that his lungs were full of fluid, and they diagnosed him as having what is sometimes called silo filler's disease from breathing nitrogen dioxide. He was treated with corticosteroids and other medications. He improved, but his condition relapsed in a few weeks, and that's another thing that's common with these cases. He did respond to treatments, but he never did seem to recover fully. So in this case, the person was permanently disabled, but he did survive. Another one of the cases in the publication is about two 16-year-old boys who entered an upright oxygen-limiting silo to repair some breather bags, and they did this without adults' permission. But they entered this silo. It was unknown to anyone else, and eventually they were discovered. When they discovered, it was too late to save them, and they both died. In another case, this is a case where a farmer was injured without ever entering a silo. He was feeding cattle near a silo that had fresh corn silage in it, and there was an irritating yellow haze in the air. He felt weak. The haze was irritating, but he was able to work. Again, that night, he developed a severe cough with some bleeding. The next morning, he went to the doctor. They discovered that he had fluid in his lungs. In this case, he responded very well to treatment. Although he was in the hospital for 20 days, he did appear to make a full recovery. We also have some cases in the publication about animals being killed by silo gases escaping from silos and then entering barns and other structures nearby.
What's your recommendation then for people who would like to avoid having any of these issues?
Well, one of the first things to remember is that if you see a yellow or brown haze around a silage storage structure, that means stay away. And if you've got a vehicle that has been parked close to it, that means you're not going to be able to enter that vehicle for a while. You'll have to wait until the haze goes away, which may take a few days. And then what you'll need to do after that is you'll need to bring in a strong ventilator, such as the blower off of a harvester. And you want to turn that on as you open the doors to the vehicles in the trunk and blow that vehicle out very well before you enter it. If you see this gas escaping a silage storage structure and it is near to a place, to a building where that houses either people or animals, those people and animals need to be moved, as it's not going to be safe to stay there. If the crop has been stressed, for instance, let's say we get a hailstorm, if you can get out and harvest that plant material immediately before it has a chance to take a lot of nitrates out of the soil, that's okay. On the other hand, if you're not able to get out there immediately, it may be best to wait for a couple of weeks after heavy rains or any crop damage to give the plants some time to reduce the nitrates that they contain. It's very important to keep children and animals away from recently filled silos. I remember when I was a kid and my grandfather, he had an upright silo, and any time that he put silage in there, we were forbidden from going near the silo. And of course, when you forbid children from doing something, sometimes that's often what they do. And I remember going near that silo and sometimes seeing kind of a green liquid coming up out of the soil. This would be from the liquid from the silage seeping into the soil. And sometimes I remember seeing some bubbling around there. Fortunately for me, there was not a lot of gas in the air, so I wasn't hurt by that. But we wanted to keep children and animals away from recently filled silos, any attached feed rooms. If we do have feed rooms that are near silos, as long as we're not noticing any gases, it's good to keep the windows open and ventilate for a few weeks. One of the things that is one of the most dangerous things that we can ever do is to enter an upright silo, especially within the first month or two after it's been filled with silage. So we want to do everything we can to avoid having to enter that silo. One of the things that we can do is we can have good spreaders and distributors to try and spread that silage around inside the silo mechanically so that no one has to get in there and level it manually. If we have to get in and if we have to get into a silo at any point in time, whether it is to put some plastic sheeting on it or to level the silo, there's really not a safe way to do that without having some air monitoring equipment. If a person absolutely has to go in, again, we don't recommend it, but we do know that sometimes people do go in. If you go in, at the very least, use a strong blower, such as the blower of the silage loader. Use a flexible drop-down tube. Try to get that tube down as close to the surface of the silage as you can, and ventilate it for at least 30 minutes. Now, that's no guarantee that there won't still be some toxic gases left in the silo. So we really recommend that no one ever enter one. But if you absolutely are going to, then use a good blower and ventilate for the longest time that you can before you go in.
If something happens around a silo, what's your recommendation?
Unfortunately, when one person gets into trouble in a silo, what we want to do is we want to rush in and help them. And that's a natural instinct, but it tends to result in more people dying. Very often, when a person dies in a silo, it ends up being a group of people because they go in one after another to try and help those who are inside. So as difficult as this is, the most important thing to do is to call 911 and allow trained and well-equipped emergency responders to make the rescue. That's very difficult to do, but it can make the difference between one person being killed and an entire family being killed.
Mitch, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby. I've enjoyed visiting with you.
That was K-State Professor of Agricultural Safety and Health, Mitch Ricketts. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will link the publication, Protecting Yourself from Respiratory Hazards in Agriculture, if you'd like to read more on it. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. Japanese beetle adults, green June beetle adults, mimosa webworm, and fall armyworm are all active in Kansas. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd discusses the damage they can cause and if there's anything that can be done to control them. Raymond, a lot to cover this week. Let's start off first with the Japanese beetle adults. What are we seeing there?
Well, what we're seeing, Jeff, is a lot of damage. They typically emerge June and around July, August, going to September, depending on the temperature. But they're feeding on a wide diversity of plants. You can see the damage on roses and crepe myrtle and grapes and linden and sycamore trees. And so what do? Well, if the damage is extensive, the only thing is to spray with an insecticide. However, many of those insecticides will harm some of the beneficial insects. And remember, carbaryl, which was the active ingredient in 7, is no longer available. So the new formulations of 7 have a pyrethroid in them, whether it be lambda-cyhalothrin or bifenthrin and cyfluthin. Those are going to kill natural enemies along with bees and pollinators also. So you have to be careful about applying those. Do it when the pollinators and bees are not active. So make your applications in the early morning or late evening. But make an assessment at this point, here we are in August, is it worth to spray at this point if the damage is already going to be, you can't salvage them. And then, of course, don't use the Japanese beetle traps. One of our recommendations from K-State Extension is giving your neighbors as Christmas presents because they attract more Japanese beetles into an area than you'll normally see, especially in urban areas. So at this point, make an assessment. If it warrants a spray, fine. If not, just let it go. The Japanese beetles, females, will lay the eggs in the turf grass, and then the larvae will emerge, close, and then they'll be in the ground for the remainder of the season.
And then I assume we're also seeing some damage from the green June beetles as well?
Yeah, they do get confused, but the green June beetle is larger and less of a pest problem. They're just more noticeable because they're flying around and they run into people. The larvae are in the soil, just like Japanese beetle, and then when they come out, they crawl on their back. But they're less of a problem than Japanese beetle adults. They do sometimes feed on some trees, maples and oaks, but they'll also feed on fruit like apple or peaches or nectarine fruit. At this point, apples. But they're not a major problem overall. We do have an extension fact sheet on both of them, one on Japanese beetle and green June beetle you can download online to get more information.
We are seeing some damage, though, from the mimosa webworm.
Yes, if you have honey locust trees or mimosa trees and the tips are browning back, that is an indication of mimosa webworm, which is a caterpillar, and there's nothing you can do about it right now. This is a very difficult insect to deal with because the window of opportunity for management is very narrow. You have to spray before the leaves close in because at that point it protects the caterpillars. If the damage is too bad, you're just going to have to live with it. If you have the ability, you can prune out some of the damaged areas, but sometimes that's just not going to be practical because of the size of the trees. As long as the trees are not getting heavily infested, 80% almost the damage, and you have large trees, you should be okay. But next year, call the Extension Office or Department of Entomology about timing of applications because, like I said, that window of application for an insecticide is very narrow.
In terms of the fall armyworm, what are we seeing there?
We are getting some inquiries, Jeff, about fall armyworm. Of course, 2022 is that almost biblical year, but we've had some isolated cases, Wichita and around Manhattan and others, where the larvae are feeding on turf grass and also on brome or fescue in the pasture areas at high numbers. I got a call yesterday. Somebody was saying they were getting about 10 to 15 per square foot. That's substantial. So if you need to treat because of the potential damage, do so. There's extension publication on fall armyworm. You can get information. Contact your extension office or our Department of Entomology for materials you can use. I will say that the pyrethroids, lambda-cyhalothrin, permethrin, cyfluthrin, are probably going to be the ones to use because they go through 6 larval instars. And so the last 3 are the most damaging, and you need something that's going to kill those instars, and it's basically going to be pyrethroids at this point. Unfortunately, they will negatively impact some beneficial insects and pollinators, so you have to be very exercise judicious use of these when you make your applications. But yeah, if you think that there's sufficient numbers, then spray. If not, just let them go because they will eventually dissipate.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd. Again, for more information, contact your local extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.